Hi, my name is Robert Alden, and I am presenting a book talk on Neal Shusterman's The Schwa Was Here. Now, Neal Shusterman is an author, obviously, who's written a number of books, including things like the Accelerati trilogy, the Unwind Dystology, the Skinjacker trilogy, and also in this series, which is about a character named Anthony Bonanno, who is also called Antsy. He's written a couple of follow-up books called Antsy Does Time and Ship Out of Luck. So the Schwa Was Here came from an idea that Shusterman had doing an author visit to a school. And a teacher had pointed out a young man who had had his hand raised the entire time, wanted to ask a question, and who happened to be in front of a dictionary, and Mr. Shusterman couldn't believe that he'd missed this kid, but realizing that he was kind of like a schwa. He was there, but he's not really there. And for those of you who don't know what a schwa is just a sound in phonics. Schwa is commonly referred to as the sound. For example, in about, the in about would be the schwa. So it's a sound that you really don't think of, and it's something that even seeing the symbol of it, it's an upside down lowercase e, can be a little not memorable. So the Schwa is about, or the Schwa Was Here is about a young man named Anthony Bonanno. And what I liked about this book was that it was based a lot on the author's life. He was born and raised in Brooklyn, and so this really felt like it was written from his memories, but yet still written from an 8th grader's point of view. So Anthony is an 8th grader, and he happens to be given a task by his dad, who works in plastics, to try and destroy a mannequin, which is said to be unbreakable. So as he and 2 of his friends are trying to do this, this kid named Calvin Schwa, who's also in their grade, happens to show up. And they realize they know him, but he's always forgettable. He's like the most average kid out there. And in fact, most people don't even realize he's there. So they realize there's this thing called the Schwa effect, where they realize he can be there and nobody takes notice of him. And the first passage that I'm going to read for you guys comes from the book describing what the Schwa effect is about. So they're meeting and they're talking. This is after they've kind of realized that, hey, he's kind of there, but he's never there. Auntie begins, no, I tell them, the Schwa's not mentally handicapped. It's something else, and don't pretend that you don't know what I'm talking about. Hey, didn't I say there was something weird about him, Ira said. I mean, like the way he always just appears like he's spying on you. He's sneaky, Weasley. I don't think he means to be, I told them. It's just like he always happens to be standing in your blind spot. Yeah, and when he's around, every spot is a blind spot, said Ira. It's friggin' weird. It's like he's a ghost or something. You gotta be dead to be a ghost, I reminded him. No, it's more like I searched for the right word. It's like he's functionally invisible. The proper term is observationally challenged, Howie says. What do you mean, proper term? How can there be a proper term for it when I just made it up? Well, if you're gonna make something up, make up the proper term. I keep trying to think this through. It's like when he's in a room and doesn't say anything, you could walk in, walk out, and never know he was there. Like a tree falling in the forest, says Ira. Huh? You know, it's the old question. If a tree falls in a forest and no one's there to hear it, does it really make a sound? Howie considers this. Is it a pine forest or oak? So from there, it goes on to where the Schwa is in the room at the time, and they don't realize he's there. So what they decide to do is do some experiments to measure the Schwa effect, to find out what they can really get away with. And as they're doing this, they realize, Antsy realizes, hey, maybe I can make some money out of this. So from there, it leads to some activities that are kind of fun to read about. And one of the activities leads to a gentleman named Mr. Crawley. Not to be confused with Mr. Crawley from Downton Abbey, just saying, for those of you who watch Downton Abbey. But anyways, Mr. Crawley is a recluse, a shut-in, and he owns one of the restaurants in the area of Brooklyn that they live in. He's also said to be pretty influential. At one point, he stopped all the eggs from coming into that area of Brooklyn. So through that, they have an interaction with Mr. Crawley, and then Mr. Crawley's niece, whose name is Lexi. And Lexi becomes a part of the group with Ansi and the Schwa, and there's a little bit of a romantic triangle, so to speak. And the Schwa becomes more and more increasingly aware of how he wants to be remembered. He's kind of tired of being invisible. And what I found interesting was that it also had a reflection on Ansi as well, because in his own family, Ansi was kind of invisible. And there is a moment where Ansi has to force himself not to be invisible in front of his parents. One other section that I'd like to read from, this just kind of struck me as funny as a math teacher. And I really, really liked the way that Shusterman described this. To me, this was hilarious because, again, math teacher joke. This is from the chapter, "Maybe they had it right in France because getting my head lopped off by a guillotine would have been easier." The chapter titles are hilarious. So anyways, life went from being a bad haircut to being an algebra exam. In algebra, things only make sense once you're done. There are no shortcuts, and you always have to show your work. The problem becomes more complicated the second you add a new variable. I mean, solving for x was hard enough, but with me, Lexi, and the Schwa too, I had to solve for x, y, and z. When things get that complicated, you might as well just put down your pencil and admit defeat. The thing is, the Schwa was not just your typical variable. He was like I, the imaginary number, the square root of -1, which doesn't exist, yet does in its own weird way. The Schwa was on the cusp of being there and not being there, which is why I guess which I guess is why he clung so tightly to Lexi and me. So the things that I really loved about this book were it was so relatable for 8th graders. Shusterman writes in an 8th grade voice. It is written first person, and it was written in a way that I felt like I was back in 8th grade again. I was experiencing all that awkwardness, that weirdness that goes with being an 8th grader, and how you're very self-confident but very insecure all at the same time. It's one of those books where you get to the end and you want to know more. I'm really glad that Shusterman wrote a couple more books in the series because I kind of want to go and read those now to find out what happened with Ansi and hopefully to find out what happened with the Schwa and Lexi and Mr. Crawley and his parents. Because the more I read the book, the more invested I became in the characters. At first, I wasn't sure about the Schwa. I was like, what's going on there? Because here's a kid who is just kind of there. And as a teacher, that also led me to think, hey, I need to find those functionally invisible kids in my classroom, the ones that are there that I just maybe don't see all the time because of the kids who really stand out, or the kids who stand out in a way that maybe isn't the most productive. So it, again, as me as a teacher, it really opened my eyes. I would definitely really recommend The Schwa Was Here. It's a book, it's a very, I won't say for an adult it's an easy read, but for kids they'll really be challenged by it. And there are themes in there about friendship and family and responsibility, not only to yourself but to your friends and to those you respect. And there's a little bit of love in there and a little bit of, there's a lot of stuff, again, that kids will relate to. So The Schwa Was Here by Neal Shusterman. I highly recommend it, and please check it out.